In the days when man's only ambition was to exist, life was simple, the land was vast, and the people lived peacefully amidst one another, with nature as their only companion. Every village had its king, but their power was gentle, meant to protect rather than conquer. But the winds of change began to stir when the king of Oro, Oba Oro, returned from his distant journey to Egypt. He had seen the beauty of the Egyptian palace, the towering pyramids, and the armies that bowed to a single ruler. To him, this was majesty, this was power. His heart, once content with peace, now burned with ambition. He no longer wished to rule Oro alone. He decided to unite all the neighboring villages under his command, not through diplomacy, but through conquest. Within 5 years, Oro's warriors marched through 4 neighboring villages, bringing them to their knees. The once peaceful lands now trembled at the mention of Oro's name. Oba Oro's vision of an empire was becoming reality, and his sights were set on the next target, Ijoko. Ijoko had just experienced a great loss. Their king, Oba Hanu, had passed away into the ancestors' realm, leaving the throne empty at a time when leadership was most important. Oba Oro's mighty army was only a village away, and in 4 months' time, they would descend upon Ijoko. The council of elders knew they needed a strong king to lead the people into battle, but tradition complicated their choice. Oba Hanu had 2 twin sons, Taye and Kehinde. Tradition dictated that Taye, being the firstborn, was the rightful heir to the throne. However, the people had seen Kehinde's strength, his fearlessness in battle, and his keen strategic mind. And he had led Ijoko's warriors to victory in smaller wars, proving himself capable in time of war. Taye, though noble, lacked his brother's courage. He was known more for his wisdom and gentleness, but these qualities the people feared would be weak in the face of Oro's unstoppable force. The elders, torn between tradition and survival, proposed a challenge. They would pit the true brothers against one another, not in combat only, but in a series of trials that would test their strength, wisdom, and leadership. The winner would sit on the throne, and the people hoped that Kehinde's proven ability would make him the next king. Taye, understanding the stakes and knowing his own limitations, felt the weight of the trials pressing down on him. While he had the birthright, he knew in his heart that he could not match Kehinde's might. In the dead of night, days before the final trial, Taye made a decision. He would not wait to be humiliated in front of his people. He packed a small bundle of food and water and fled from Ijoko. He did not know where he would go, but he only knew that staying meant dishonor. Taye's journey took him far from Ijoko, through thick forests, across wide rivers. His feet ached, and his spirit was low, but was determined to disappear into the wilderness, never to return. But fate had other plans. While resting in a quiet clearing, Taye was ambushed by a group of Oro armies. They did not recognize him as the prince of Ijoko, only as a lone traveler, easy prey for capture. Bound in chains, Taye was marched back to the village of Oro, a place that loomed large in the imagination of those from smaller villages. He had heard tales of its power, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight that awaited him. Oro was unlike anything Taye had ever seen. Majestic structures rose high into the sky, casting long shadows across the village. The streets buzzed with life. traders from distant lands, soldiers in polished armor, and townspeople busy with their daily lives. It was a kingdom of wealth and power, far surpassing the simple beauty of Ijoko. Despite his chains, Taye could not help but feel amused by the sight before him. Taken before Obaoro's castle, Taye was presented as a prisoner. He kept his identity hidden, for to reveal himself as a prince of Ijoko would lead to his execution. Instead, he posed as a simple wanderer, lost in the woods and captured by mistake. His quick thinking and ability to remain calm under pressure spared him from immediate death, and he was instead sentenced to serve as a laborer in the palace grounds. Taye's days as a palace slave in Oro were hard. He was assigned to menial tasks, cleaning the vast courtyard, tending to the royal gardens, and carrying supplies for the warriors. But it wasn't the labor that weighed on him most. It was the overwhelming sense of captivity. He had gone from being a prince to a nameless servant, working in the heart of the kingdom that threatened his homeland. As the days passed, Taye noticed something peculiar. A particular chamber in the palace was heavily guarded day and night. No one spoke of it openly, and anytime a servant wandered too close, they were swiftly reprimanded. The more he observed, the more his curiosity grew. What could it be hidden in that room? Why was it so fiercely protected? One night, while gathered around the servant quarters, Taye consciously brought up the subject to the other slaves. At first, they were reluctant to speak, but after some coercing, an older servant lowered his voice and revealed the secret. "It's the princess," he whispered. "The king's only daughter. She has been afflicted by a terrible curse, a sickness that no healer in the land has been able to cure. Her skin is covered in sores and maggots that crawl out of her wounds. No one is allowed near her, not even the queen. It is said that the sight of her is too much to bear." The story chilled Taye to his core. A princess locked away, suffering from an incurable disease. It was a tragic fate, but the more he thought about it, the more his mind turned towards the herbal knowledge his mother has passed down to him. He remembered the remedies she had taught him, cures from ailments that even the most skilled healers often overlook. Could that be something he could do? Could he help her? That night, Taye laid awake, his thought racing. The idea of approaching the king seemed impossible, yet the desire to help the princess grew stronger with each passing hour. The next morning, Taye had made his decision. He would speak to the king. It was a dangerous gamble. Approaching the king without permission was ground for severe punishment. But he could not ignore his feelings that this was his chance to do something meaningful, perhaps even to redeem himself from abandoning his period. Taye waited for the right moment, observing the palace routine closely. After days, he saw his opportunity. The king often took a morning stroll through the palace garden, accompanied by few guards. It was during this brief window that Taye would make his move. As Obaoro walked through the gardens, Taye stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The guard immediately rushed to restrain him, but before they could, Taye spoke out. "Your Majesty, I beg your audience for a moment." The king, intrigued by the audacity of the slave, gestured for the guards to hold back. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his tone cold and commanding. Taye fell to his knees, keeping his eyes lowered in respect. "I have heard of the plight of the princess, your daughter. I I believe I can help. I have knowledge of herbs and remedies that may cure her. Oba Oru's eyes narrowed. And why should I trust you? You are nothing but a servant, a prisoner from a land I will so conquer. What makes you think you can succeed when my best healers have tried and failed? Taye's voice wavered, but he held free. I had no reason to deceive you, Your Majesty. If I fail, you can take my life. But if I succeed, your daughter may finally be freed from her suffering. The king paused, weighing the risk. Before he could respond, the queen, who had overheard the conversation, approached. Her eyes were filled with desperate hope. Please, my husband, she whispered. We have tried everything. What harm could one more attempt do? Oba Oru hesitated, his love for his daughter evident in his troubled expression. Very well, he said finally, his voice heavy with reluctance. You have 1 month's leave. If you fail to cure her at that time, she will be executed. Taye bowed deeply, hiding his fear. Thank you, Your Majesty. Taye was escorted to the forbidden room, his heart racing as the wooden door creaked open. The stench hit him first, a sickly, rotten odor that made him gag. As he stepped inside, his eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw her, the princess. She lay on a grand bed, her face turned away from him. Her body was covered in bandages, but even through them, Taye could see the extent of her suffering. Her skin was discolored, and the sores that dotted her body were oozing with infection. Maggots wriggled in the open wounds, a horrifying sight that would have broken lesser men. But Taye was determined. For the first few days, Taye worked tirelessly. He gathered herbs from the palace gardens and mixed them with oils and balms, applying them to the princess' wounds. The palace guard kept a close watch on him, and though the princess barely spoke, Taye could sense her pain. He cleaned her sores, replaced her bandages, and stayed by her side, speaking to her softly, offering words of comfort. As the days passed, the maggots began to disappear, and the sores slowly started to heal. The princess, who had been silent and withdrawn, began to open up to Taye. She spoke of her loneliness, her fear that she would never be seen as anything but a cursed child. Taye listened, offering her hope and companionship in a world that had abandoned her. One evening, as Taye was preparing her treatment, the princess took his hand. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thrilled but sincere. No one have ever shown me such kindness. Taye's heart swelled with emotion. As the space between them closed, the princess leaned in, her lips trembling as she neared his. Taye found himself drawn to her, the warmth of their connection stronger than any fear of consequence. Just as their lips were about to touch, the door to the princess' room creaked open. Who had stepped into the room? Will the king spare Taye if he discovers his intentions? What fate awaits Ijoko while its prince is captive? Find out in part 2.